As of recording this video, there are currently 7 big box expansions for Marvel Champions in the game. So we have Rise of Red Skull, Galaxy's Most Wanted, the Mad Titan Shadow, Sinister Motives, Mutant Genesis, Next Evolution, and the Age of Apocalypse. And I thought it would be fun to rank these expansions and just the box itself, not the entire cycle of cards, but just the boxes themselves from my least favorite to my most favorite. Really quick note, this is just my opinion. This is what I enjoy the most. And basically, I'm rating these boxes mostly on their villains, but also slightly on their heroes. But the villains for me personally are kind of like the main focus of the big boxes. So we're going to be looking at the villains and the heroes, and this is my own personal opinion. I do recommend though, and I will say that if you enjoy Marvel Champions, you should get each of these boxes, right? And especially all the cards for that cycle. In my opinion, that's the best way to buy Marvel Champions is the big box and the entire rest of the hero packs for that cycle, because usually those cards help flesh out that box and that cycle as a whole, especially all the heroes that come in it. We're going to start with my least favorite, number 7. All right, so number 7 is probably everyone's least favorite box, unfortunately, and that is Galaxy's Most Wanted. Now, the hero cards in Galaxy's Most Wanted are actually not that bad, or the heroes, I should say, which is Groot and Rocket. Out of the box, they're really hard to navigate and really hard to pilot. This is one of those classic examples that you have to get all the heroes, in my opinion, of that cycle to really kind of flesh out Rocket and Groot. Rocket, I think, is a little bit better out of the box. Groot, a lot of people hate it right away, but I think Groot is much better once you get like a larger card pool of Guardians cards. But he's still a fine hero. So those are fine, whatever. The problem comes with the villains. So you start off with the Brotherhood of Badoon, which isn't a bad scenario. It has this whole charge up ability on the main scheme where it kind of it's more or less a clock to kind of keep you moving, because after you resolve the charge up ability, which is basically done after the first step of the main scheme, there's a certain amount of counters there, which is 4. You take 2 indirect damage to each player. So it's basically just trying to like push you along the game so you're not sitting there building out all day, and just to speed up the game. My biggest issue with this game is that the modular set ship command has to be used, and when you use that modular set, it gives you a free resource generator, which is like a little too strong in my opinion, especially for a scenario like this. It just makes Badoon or Drang, I should say, depending on how you want to look at Brother Badoon Drang. It makes Drang a little bit too easy and a little bit too straightforward. Now, there are some quality parts to him, which is that a lot of people like playing him without ship command, without getting the free resource. Like, you can't use the resource for yourself, but you can use it for the treachery cards. I've seen people play it that way to kind of help balance it out a little bit, which isn't a bad idea. A lot of people liked using him for a little while as like a test villain, which again, I don't really like using as a test villain because you have an extra resource generator right off the bat, and I don't think that's that great. So Brotherhood Badoon Drang, I don't think is that great. Now, Collector 1 is, I actually think, the worst scenario in this box because of how the collection mechanic works. So the Collector 1 is most famous for making the collection, right? You have to make the collection. And basically, it's anytime a card leaves play that was in play will join the collection. And you lose the game if there's at least 5 cards per player. So if you're solo, it's 5 cards. If you're playing 2 player, it's 10 cards in the collection. So if you have an ally and that ally leaves play, that goes in the collection. If you have an upgrade or support that leaves play, it goes in the collection. That would be fine. My issue is that any of his attachments or any of his minions that leave play also go into the collection. And this was the poor design choice, in my opinion, on this scenario. If they had changed it so that he couldn't collect his own minions, it wouldn't be that bad, or it'd be a lot better at least. Now, I've seen people, as long as you play without the menagerie medley, it gets, I believe, a little bit easier or a little bit better, because I think that's where a lot of the minions are. But I haven't played it in so long that I just don't even mess with it that much. But it's really, really annoying that he will collect his own cards instead of just collecting your cards. I think if they made that slight change, it would make the scenario much better. After that, we have Collector 2, which was also a disappointment to people when the box came out, because it's like, Collector isn't that big of a name or that big of a thing in Guardians that we were that excited for 2 collectors. Collector 2 is a bit more interesting though, because it's basically you're going through each of the main schemes and trying to get it down to 0. That's essentially how you win the game, is removing all the threat from the scheme, because the actual collector himself can't be defeated. Now, when you would defeat him, he would flip over and then he'd get like a whole not defeated thing and whatever. And it helps you remove threat from the scheme, which is useful as well. I like the way that this scenario works. I actually think this is a much better scenario than we gave it credit for. I feel like at the time it was just guilty by association because everyone hated Collector 1 so much that Collector 2 just kind of like got lumped in there with it. So Collector 2, definitely not as bad as people make it out to be. But I think it was just guilty by association with Collector 1. Now, the next villain is kind of a polarizing one with Nebula. The reason being is because Nebula, depending on how many technique cards you draw, Nebula can be either really easy or really hard. It always seems to be one of those two things and not really in between. Every time I played against Nebula, it's either been the easiest game I ever played or tougher than Ronin. It's a really weird balancing thing going on. And on Expert, it's kind of even trickier because she doesn't get rid of all of her technique cards that get attached. So her whole hook is that when she initiates an activation against you, you resolve the special ability on technique attachments in play and then discard them. Well, in stage 2 and stage 3, you only discard one of them, so she can kind of keep stacking them. And of course, when she gets one, it gains Surge, and they were kind of Surge happy with this whole expansion. So unfortunately, Nebula just is kind of this rougher scenario, and again, can be a little too swingy. It feels like it's not very consistent at all. Then finally, that gets us to Ronin. And Ronin, I feel like gets dumped on a lot as like this unfair villain and that he's terrible and that everyone hates him. And the thing is, like, if you rush against Ronin, he's actually really easy to beat or much easier to beat, but he is hard because of Surge, right? That's really what makes him hard, is that he has a lot of cards that Surge. I think the designers even admitted this, that they basically wanted this box to be a little bit harder and they didn't really know how to do it, so they just kept putting Surges onto things. So that's kind of what makes it so tough. I still don't mind Ronin. Actually, in a multiplayer game, he's not as bad. In campaign, he's impossible, so don't even bother. Or expert campaign is impossible. Not really impossible, but really hard. Ronin in multiplayer is much easier than Ronin in true solo, but he's still really tough. He still swings really hard. So anyway, all those villains mashed up together just creates not a great experience, not a lot of memorable moments. I still go back and play Ronin a fair amount. Maybe I'll play Collector 2 a bit, but that's about it from that box. All right, number 6 is probably going to be the most polarizing one on my list, I assume, because I think there's a lot of people that like this expansion, and the more I play of it, the more I dislike it, and that is Next Evolution. Now, as far as the heroes go, I really enjoy Domino. I think Domino is a lot of fun, and I think Cable is fine too. I have nothing against Cable. I just really enjoy Domino. Domino is one of my favorite heroes out there. I think she's a lot of fun. I might play a little too much of her, but still, I think she's a lot of fun and really interesting. The problem for me is, once again, the villains kind of aren't up to snuff, in my opinion, and they did something really weird with this box that we'll get into in a second. But really quick, running through the villains, we have Morlock Siege, which is an interesting idea that basically there's a bunch of different marauders out there, or different marauders you can kind of go through, and that you're trying to protect all the Morlocks, right? And as long as you beat stage 1 of the villain of the main scheme, I should say, and you get the it advances by the knock counter, so you get toughs on your Morlocks. It's actually a really easy scenario overall, because you can kind of rush down the villain. They don't have a ton of life. Like, I think the highest one is 12. No, maybe 30. No, yeah, I think it's 12, just glancing through it. But a lot of them are like 9 or 10. So they don't have that much life, so you can really rush them down really quick. It's not too hard. And the Morlocks will each have tough on it, which, you know, kind of buys you a round or two. It's really not that hard of a scenario. It's actually pretty easy overall, maybe a bit too easy. Now, with that, the next one was On the Run, which, again, I wasn't a big fan of this. I think it's better than the Morlock Siege one. Morlock Siege one, but I don't think it's that great. The whole Hope's Captor thing is an interesting idea. You basically have to beat the same enemy twice in a row, and depending on which Marauder you get, this is either a hard scenario or harder scenario, or a very easy scenario. The Marauders aren't, their difficulties are at various levels, and we can do a separate video on that if people are interested. I don't want to get too much into it, but I think it's just a very easy scenario overall as well, but a bit better with one. Juggernaut was the biggest one that people, I feel like, were excited for, and Juggernaut's cool and whatnot, but once you learn that you basically just have to flip his helmet and get him to Juggernaut exposed, he's much easier. Like, he's much easier because you get Hope Summers. Hope Summers was a mistake, in my opinion, of having her basically in this rest of the scenario. She's in scenario 3, 4, and 5. And basically her thwart and attack is equal to the thwart and attack of your hero, which just can make her really strong. She also has a mental resource. So basically, when you flip the helmet for Juggernaut exposed, he takes 1 additional damage for each card with a printed mental resource, which is her. So she can just start like really wailing away on Juggernaut. It's not that hard to get his helmet off. It's not as great of an experience. Keeping the main scheme in check isn't too hard either. Like, it's a little hard, but it's not completely hard. So anyway, Juggernaut I like, but once you kind of like figure out Juggernaut or solve Juggernaut, it's a much easier experience. Mr. Sinister, though, I actually really enjoy. I think Mr. Sinister is pretty fun. I think he's well balanced. I think he can be really hard, but really fair. And I like the whole, sometimes you put telepathy in, sometimes you put flight in, sometimes you put super strength in. Like, I like that mixing and matching. It kind of keeps you on your toes. I think that scenario in itself was really well done. I think it's fun. It's a little quick, the main schemes, so you can't flip down as much. So I know for solo players that enjoy flipping down a ton, can't really do that as much because he really won't allow it. But for me personally, because I'm not big into flipping down, that's not a big ordeal for me. So you have to be a little quicker with your build out, you have to be a little quicker with your events. But I still think it's a pretty cool scenario and well done. Strife, on the other hand, I don't really care for. I get what Strife is trying to do with basically giving you more cards, right? Especially on scheme, what is it, 2B, where you get +2 to your hand size, and then everything costs 1 more to play. Well, if I just have a lot of doubles in my deck, right? You're 3 normal, and then like, 2 for whatever the aspect is, and I draw one of those doubles, it kind of cancels out that whole thing. And it's just again, they're trying to make it so that if you have like a ton of events, like you run like an event heavy deck, like 6 event cards, he would start swinging for like +6, which is really could be rough, right? The main scheme on the 1B goes up by the most common card type. So that could be really rough. But if you have a pretty balanced deck of allies, supports, resources, events, like, it's probably not gonna be that bad. It might be like 2, maybe 3, but it's not overwhelming. It's not super hard. So I don't know. Strife is, like, the idea of it's not a bad idea, but I feel like the execution's really poor of Strife. So again, I don't really care for him as a villain. I don't think he's super challenging, especially for a 5th villain, which is supposed to be challenging. So I like Mr. Sinister. Juggernaut I like because thematically he's cool. The rest I don't care for. Now, the one other thing that this box does that's really weird is that Standard is really easy and Expert is really hard. Now, Expert isn't impossible hard, but it's just much harder. Like, it's a huge jump up. And it's kind of a weird balancing act because I feel like a lot of people in this game play, okay, there's the quote unquote very dedicated group that will play only Expert because Standards become too easy. And I get that for a lot of scenarios, right? I play Expert in a lot of things off stream because it's a more fun way for me to play. But I think the more casual base that doesn't kind of play all the time really enjoys Standard. And I think this Standard was a step down and just being a bit too easy, but Expert would kind of feel out of reach for them. Right? It would just be too much of a leap. Like, it feels like too much of a gap. It's really weirdly balanced in that sense. And it's like they're trying to cater to 2 different groups. And I don't think it really hits the mark, in my opinion. Now, you may disagree, of course. But for me, they want this to be a good box for new people to get into, and that they make Standard a bit easier and it's good for those people. But they also want to cater to maybe the more experienced players like the rest of us, but they make Expert really hard so that figuring that we mainly play Expert. To me, again, if you're kind of coming in at next evolution, like this is, let's just say you start with the X-Men wave and this is your number 2 box, it'd be really hard to make that jump from Standard to Expert. It feels like such a massive leap compared to the other boxes. All right, number 5 for me is Mad Titan's Shadow. And as far as the heroes go, I don't like Spectrum. Adam Warlock is fine. I don't like deck building for him as much. I thought I was going to like him more, but I really don't. And they are, to me, some of the weakest heroes. Actually, they might be the weakest heroes in any big box. The villains are better, but they're the weakest heroes. So going through the villains really quick, we have Ebony Maw, who I actually think is pretty good. I like his whole spell counter or invocation counter with the spell cards. I think that system is pretty cool and how that works. I enjoy that, and especially he can start stacking them. A lot of them will surge into other cards, which I know we all hate surge, but at least they don't affect you right away. Like, it's a timer, so you can see when things are going to affect you. I like it. I think it's a really well done way to do kind of like the first villain in a box. So I enjoy that. Tower Defense, I think, gave us our first, besides Wrecking Crew, I guess, it gave us like our first 2 villain scenario. And I thought I thought tower defense is fine. I thought it's fine. I think it's an interesting setup. Basically, you're trying to guard the Avengers tower while Proxima Midnight and Corvus Glaive attacking against you. I think it's a pretty standard scenario. I don't think it's anything too out there or anything, but one that I enjoy playing from time to time. I think it's fun and enjoyable. Thanos, which is fantastic. Thanos, I think, is one of the best designed villains in the entire game. The Infinity Gauntlet is amazing. It works really well for him. All of it thematically works really well. Feels good. He's really, really hard, but not impossible, right? You have to kind of plan around him, but once you get a good game plan, you have to play well, but you can beat him, right? He's hard but fair. And to me, he's a top 3 villain because of that. He's really enjoyable, really fun. I would buy this box because of Thanos. I think he is that good and that enjoyable as a villain. I think they did an amazing job with him. Hela was, I feel like, right out of the gate, a lot of people's favorites, including mine. It was a really interesting way because it felt like a scenario from Lord of the Rings where you're traversing through, I'm not even going to try to say the side schemes, but there's 3 different side schemes that you go through and they come out with certain enemies. And it was just a really cool way of doing things. The problem is that there's a formula now to beat them, right? You basically have to defeat the villain first, or the minion first, and then take out the side scheme. But you just have to get your timings right. They're a little weird. And by the end, hopefully you're built out so you can rush them down. There's also a lot of threat in the main scheme that we can put on. I think it's 18 is the threshold, which is kind of crazy. Hela, you just kind of have to beat and make sure every time she gets her upgrades, you kind of knock her out. And she only comes in with 8 health, which isn't that much health. So you can kind of one-shot her with a lot of cards nowadays, or attack her and then one-shot her with an event. So it's a little too easy sometimes to beat her. But again, it's kind of a formula now, unfortunately, and that's made things, I think, a bit easier than people would like. Now, I hope this is a system that they do down the road at some point and they kind of perfect it a little bit better. They've attempted it, I think, a few times now, and I don't think they've ever done anything quite like this again, but I hope they give it another shot because I think they've learned some lessons from it. Now we get to Loki. Loki is one of my least favorite villains in Marvel Champions. I don't like his design. The design is interesting. Essentially, there are 5 Loki villains, and they can switch out randomly. And it can be kind of really, really tough to deal with whatever new Loki may present itself, right? And each one has 20 life. Some of them have Retaliate, some have Stalwart. Some of them just can't take damage when there's a side scheme in play, right? It could be a ton of different things that would just kind of wreck you. One of the worst things to me is when you defeat a Loki, you have to discard cards from the top of the encounter deck until a side scheme is discarded. Now, I don't know what it is off the top of my head, but in his deck, I feel like there's 4 side schemes, like total, for him and his modular sets. Now, if you put in probably modular sets that have more side schemes, this isn't as bad, but I just feel like he discards a ton of cards and just rushes through it faster, which is just a pain. It's just a pain to deal with. So that's one of my biggest annoyances with Loki, is that after you defeat him, you deal with that whole thing. So I'm not a big fan of that. But past that, that's annoying. And then the Infinity Gauntlet's annoying. So you have to play him with the Infinity Gauntlet. It feels like it was designed for Thanos. It was really well designed. It was really good. And they said, oh wait, we should probably use it again at some point. And they just threw it onto Loki. And I know people have recommended playing Loki without it, though I do think there are certain cards that react to the gauntlet itself, so it doesn't work perfectly. But it's just the gauntlet really throws it off. The gauntlet makes it really not fun with Loki. Again, it was great with Thanos, and I think they did an amazing job, and they should have just kept it that way and not have given it to Loki. All right, so for number 4, we have the newest box, which is Age of Apocalypse. And I like Age of Apocalypse a lot. I think Bishop is a really fun hero that I've really come to enjoy a lot more than I thought I was going to. And then Magic wasn't as good as I thought she was going to be, but I think she's still fun. I think she's a good, interesting hero, so I've enjoyed her. The villains, I think, for the most part, shine pretty well in this box. So Unis, I actually really like. I think he's a really good first villain in general. I like the whole gene pool side scheme thing, and you're trying to keep that under control, but you could just kind of let that run away if you want, because, maybe you're making a final push. I think it's a cool balancing act. I really like what they did with Unis. I just think he's really fun. He could be a little tough because the infinite, what is it? The infinites that come out, infinites that come out, they can kind of just go crazy with gene pool. But overall, I think it's really, really fun scenario. It's a good first scenario. Four Horsemen, I don't like. I've talked about this a lot in my live streams over on twitch.tv/D20 Warworking. I've talked about this on other videos. I don't really like the Four Horsemen. In multiplayer, they're much harder, and I think they're better. In true solo, I just don't think it's fun. I think it's really easy. I think it's really boring. I just don't think it's good overall. So I'm not a big fan of the Four Horsemen scenario. Again, in multiplayer, it's better, but I still don't like the scenario. It just isn't that interesting to me, I guess. We've had so many multi-villain scenarios nowadays that there are others that I prefer a lot more than the Four Horsemen. Now, Apocalypse 1, or I guess just regular Apocalypse, is really good, coming in with 4 stages. I didn't think this was going to be as fun as it is, but it's really interesting. Again, it kind of does the whole Hella thing where you're doing the side schemes and kind of traversing through the side schemes, but you kind of have to really rush them near the end because when he gets 3 boost icons there at the end, or not boost icons, acceleration icons at the end. Kind of nuts, right? Gets a little too strong maybe. So I think it's a really fun scenario. It's pretty cool in the way that they do it, that when Apocalypse would be defeated, you discard each attachment from him and heal all the damage, and you get to remove X threat from the scheme. But if the main scheme pops, he just becomes like a stronger Apocalypse. I think that's a really cool way of doing it. I really like that overall. So yeah, I think that's a fun scenario. I think it's a well done scenario. It's much better than I thought it was going to be. Really enjoy it. Next up, we have Dork Beast, or Dark Beast. But Dark Beast is a scenario that's very basic. It's very, very straightforward. There's not a lot of thrills or excitement with Dark Beast, and I think that's okay. He's very simple, to the point, and I kind of enjoy that about him. Also, he comes with some amazing modular sets, which include the dinosaur set, right? Savage Lands. I think anything in dinosaurs is pretty cool. Blue Moon and Genosha are fine, but dinosaurs obviously goated. So I am a fan of that scenario in general. Again, a lot of people don't like it because it's like there's not a super interesting hook, but I feel like for a long time in like going in release order, we hadn't had a villain that was just kind of straightforward, was tough but fair, but not like overly hard. So I've enjoyed Dark Beast for that. And there's not like a lot of things to keep track of. Remember, I feel like as the game has gotten bigger, they want you to pay attention to the villain and the main scheme and this side scheme and that side scheme. And every single minion has a different thing that it does, and it reacts differently with everything. Like Dark Beast kind of throws that all out the window and just goes, no, just play the game and have fun. So I enjoy that. All right, second Apocalypse, or En Sabah Nur, and I'm sure I'm saying that wrong, is our first flip form villain, and he's not bad, right? He's not bad. I don't love him, but I don't hate him. As he flips, it can be tough to deal with, but there are certain things that will trigger those flips, right? Certain treachery cards or attachments that will trigger that. And I think it's kind of interesting in the way that it works. He's not like overly interesting. I think this whole pyramid thing where he gets like the power icons, or what is it, power counters. After resolving step 1 of the villain phase, place 1 power counter. There's at least 4 here. You remove them and you discard cards until you get a superpower card. There you go. Okay, it's fine. It helps change his forms a little bit faster, so you know each or every 4 rounds it's at least guaranteed to change a form, which I think is cool, right? I think that's balanced enough. Again, he's not bad. He doesn't blow me away in his design. I feel like there's a little too much of the hook is just like him being a 3 form card, which isn't terrible, right? I'm not bashing him. He doesn't excite me as much as other villains, but he's fine, right? He's a very, very just fine villain overall, especially for a 5th stage villain. So overall, this box, I actually enjoyed pretty much all of it except for the 4 Horsemen. I'm really not a fan of that. But even though Apocalypse 2, I may not sound like super excited for it, but like I like it a lot more Next Evolution, is what I should say. And some other final villains like Loki. I like him a lot more than those, so it kind of gets better ratings because of that. So now on to the top 3. Number 3 is the first big box, and it's one I still recommend to most people because it is very straightforward. It's very simple, but it's still a good challenge and still a lot of fun, and that is the Rise of Red Skull. Now, Hawkeye, I don't really enjoy as a hero, but he's got a great cult following that really kind of, pushes Hawkeye, which is cool to see, right? I do the same thing with Valkyrie, so I get it. Spider-Woman, on the other hand, really strong, really good, really recommend. Once you learn how her mechanics work and how to really kind of exploit her, I guess, it's really, really fun. Spider-Woman's really, really cool. So as far as villains go, the first one's Crossbones. I don't like Crossbones as much because you have to get so many encounter sets. I guess I'm lazy, right? 3 in modular sets is like too many modular sets. But when I do have to play him because of marbles or whatever, it's not the worst thing in the world, right? I don't mind Crossbones. I like what he's trying to do. I like the experimental weapon deck that kind of like mixes things up each time you play. I think that's cool. I wish there was more experimental weapons, but 4 isn't bad. But yeah, so Crossbones is fine. Nothing crazy. I just have my own personal problem with him. So yeah. And then we have Absorbing Man, who's just too easy. He's just a little too easy, unfortunately. I don't hate Absorbing Man, but I do feel like he's just too basic. 12 on the main scheme, the threshold's way too high. It's not great. So anyway, Absorbing Man, a little too easy. Then we have Taskmaster, who again is also kind of easy, but I do like his mechanic of you have to make decisions of when to flip down, right? So every time you flip up, you discard the top card in the encounter deck. And this is where messing around with changing modular sets can help, because if you add in a modular set with higher boost icons, this becomes a tougher scenario, which is kind of cool. But basically, it's making you make tough decisions, and I enjoy that, right? Is it really worth flipping down and healing if I'm just going to flip up and take 3 boost icons again? Because after you change form, you discard the top card in the counter deck and take damage. Is that worth it, right? Is that trade-off worth it? So I like that trade-off. I think that's cool. It's a little bit easier of a scenario, but again, I think the trade-off makes it a little more exciting and interesting personally. Zola is still one of the hardest villains in the game. Zola's minions are extremely tough. Every time you finish the step 1 of the villain phase, or after you finish step 1 of the villain phase, you place a test counter on his first main scheme and his second main scheme. And basically, it's like a timer to get more villains out. The problem is there are also encounter cards that put more test counters on. So you can just start getting villains like back to back to back. And the villains are no slouch. Ultimate Bioservant, rough. Zola's Mutate, rough. Berserker Mutate, rough, right? Like all these things are rough. And then they start getting attachments onto them. And not only do the attachments help them, but for certain cards like Ultimate Bioservant, he gains more attack, which is just crazy. So it's really tough. It's really strong, or he's really strong. But I do enjoy him. I think he's a fun challenge. He also has Retaliate innately, which is hard, right? So you can't do small amounts of damage. You have to do massive amounts of damage, or run a protection deck that's all based on Retaliate. Then that would work. Or find cards that don't attack; they just deal damage. That would also work. But yeah, Zola, really tough. Still really fair, but really, really tough. And then we have Red Skull, who I really like as a scenario. I think the whole side scheme deck is really cool. I like what it does there. We basically have to put it after the step 1, I think it is, of each round. Yeah, after resolving step 1 of each villain phase, you remove the top card or play the top card of the side scheme deck. So you're getting a side scheme each round. Now, there are some benefits to clearing out the side schemes, but if you don't, Red Skull gets stronger, and I think that's a really cool mechanic. Then you kind of have to deal with the whole sleeper coming in, and that becomes like a big thing, which scales really well, I think, with multiplayer. But really good scenario. Red Skull is really tough. I think Zola's harder, but like people underestimate, I think, Red Skull a little bit, because Red Skull can still be really hard, especially on Expert. It's a really good, fair challenge. It's kind of crazy to think about that this was like their first big box, like main villain design. I think they absolutely nailed Red Skull. I think it's just one of their best designs, and I really enjoy it to this day. All right, number 2, we have Mutant Genesis. Now, as far as heroes go, it comes in with Colossus and Shadowcat. I'm not a big fan of Colossus. I know a lot of people really like him. His playstyle isn't for me. Shadowcat, though, is one of the most fun heroes I've ever played. I think her whole form flipping thing is really cool. It can be a little tricky, but once you figure it out and kind of go through the motions of it, I think it's a really good hero, or she's a really good hero. I think she's really exciting, really cool, really fun. Now for the villains. I feel like some of this is polarizing, but here we go. Sabretooth. I know there's people that hate Sabretooth. I know there's people that really don't like Sabretooth. I really like Sabretooth as a villain design. I like his whole healing mechanic. I think that's cool. I think it's well done. I think it's interesting. Yes, it makes for a longer like fight process, but it never feels unfair to me. So I really enjoy it. I know people don't like protecting Robert Kelly, and I kind of get that. Basically, you're forced to defending with someone constantly, and that could be not fun for a lot of people. By the way, if you really want this to like not be fun, add the modular set. whatchamacallit, gene pool, the gene pool one, where every time you block with an ally, you have to add like the gene pool stuff on. It gets really, really hard, but that's a whole side note. But anyway, I get people don't like the Robert Kelly thing that basically is taking damage, so you can't just take a hit, right? You always have to be defending or have an ally defend so that he doesn't take a hit, which again is just a part of the strategy of what you have to deal with. I still enjoy him though. I still really like Sabretooth. I think Mystique, I think you have to take out Mystique, right? I think that's the one balancing issue that a lot of people have, because Mystique says that when she has a card, and I don't remember off the top of my head, so I'm going to look for it really fast. But basically, her cards go into your deck, right? So there's a higher probability of you eventually will draw the card. Now, for Mystique, one of her cards, Infiltration, will state, after this card enters your hand, discard an ally or support you control. And the problem is, if you don't have any allies or supports in besides what's his face, Robert Kelly, then you lose Robert Kelly and you lose the game. That is the one balancing thing you have to kind of pay attention to with that, and that's probably the worst part of it. But honestly, if you take out the Mystique modular set of Sabretooth, it will clear up a lot of your headaches, and I think you'll like Sabretooth a lot more. So don't be afraid to mess around with modular sets. I think it's definitely worth doing. And Mystique, taking her out of Sabretooth, I think is highly recommended. All right, then we have Sentinel, or the Sentinels, or Project Wide Awake, or whatever you want to call it. And I think Sentinels is okay. I'm not the biggest fan of Sentinels. I think it's fine. But basically, it's the one with all the side schemes, right? There's just constant side schemes everywhere. The whole idea is that if there's a certain amount of cards under Operation Zero Tolerance, if you get a certain amount there, then you basically lose the game. So every time you do a chump block with Operation Zero Tolerance, the ally that you use to do the block goes under operation, right? And if that keeps happening, if there are 3 more than the number of players, then you just lose the game. So one of the things they really want to do is get rid of chump blocking, and that was their way of doing it, was with Operation Zero Tolerance, which fine, like it's fine. It's a better version of Collector, at least. Because if you lose an upgrade or support, it's not like going into a collection or whatever. Or you defeat a minion, it's not going into a collection. So it's a better way of doing it. It's not amazing, but it's not a bad way either. But yeah, this is the one that comes with a bunch of side schemes. You can also get Jubilee as an ally, which is pretty good if you clear out the mutants at the mall thing. So I don't mind Sentinels. It's not my favorite scenario, but I like it enough. I think for a scenario 2, it's good. Then we have Master Mold, which puts in the Magneto ally, which I know was kind of like the first time where it's just like, oh, we have an ally that's with us through several different things. And Magneto's a little too strong, I think, in this scenario, because he heals up each time he deals damage to a Sentinel, defeats a Sentinel minion. So that part's like a little too strong, unfortunately. But overall, I still think Master Mold's like fine. I think his whole hook of that you don't want him to scheme against you, because if he does scheme against you, discard cards from the counter deck until a Sentinel minion is discarded. Put that minion in the play, engage with you. You don't give him a boost icon, which is nice, but you're just getting a ton of minions, and each Sentinel minion gains guard. So now you have to deal with like taking out minions constantly. So like, don't flip down. Basically, just kind of go toe to toe with him, and you'll be all right. Though Master Mold on stage 3 does have a lot of attack. He's got like 4 attack or something on the base. So that part's really rough. But other than that, just don't flip down, I guess. All right, then we have the mansion attack scenario, which I thought was pretty cool in the way that works. Depending on where you are in the mansion, everyone gets like steady or retaliate, or each ally minion that comes in gets toughness, or each character gets +1 attack. I like that it affects the entire board state and not just one. So I thought this is a pretty cool scenario. I really like the way that this one works. I think it's fun. I think it's interesting with mansion attacks. Yeah, I found it very enjoyable overall. It gets tough because some of the villains there are really hard to deal with. Like, I think Toad, if I remember correctly, after Toad attacks and damages a character you control, discard 1 random card from your hand. I mean, as good as card draw is, it's even worse to lose cards randomly. So that part stings. But the villain pile being random is pretty cool, and then you just have to like defeat X amount. I think it's a cool scenario. I think it works well. Then we get to Magneto himself, and I love Magneto. I think the Magneto villain is really well done. He's my favorite in the game. I like going through the whole side scheme thing of basically working, getting on board, and then eventually getting Magneto from being stalwart down to steady. The magnet counter thing, I know they've had to change how that works. We've done videos on it. If you want to learn more about it, let me know. But they've changed how the magnet counter system works, so it's a little more fair. It's a little more easy because there are ways that you can kind of get locked in a magnet loop. So anyway, Magneto villain, really enjoy. I've talked about him a ton, I feel like, so I don't really want to like harp on him too much, but definitely really enjoy Magneto. Again, one of my favorite villains out there in the game, and I like that progression of the side schemes. All right, now for my number one box overall. If you know me, you know I'm a Spider-Man fan, so this really shouldn't be much of a surprise to anyone, and that is Sinister Motives. Now, Gwen Stacy's Ghost Spider is still one of my favorite heroes in the game. I know a lot of people only play her in protection, but she works really well in aggression as and can work pretty well in justice. So I never tried her in leadership that much because there's not many cards that would trigger her whole interrupter response on an event. So I mean there are some, but I haven't done a ton of them. Miles Morales is really good, really fun. My only problem with Miles is that he came with a shield deck, and it doesn't really make sense for him. Like shield is really strong and it's good, but it doesn't make sense for him. So that feels kind of weird. But once you mess around with his deck, really strong, really fun hero. Really enjoy it. I think they are the two best heroes to come in the box like together. Just in all ways, I really enjoy both of them. All right, so then we have Sandman, who I like. Sandman. Basically, his whole thing is his surging sand counter thing. Depending on how many sand counters are on city streets, it will have you discard more cards. As you discard cards, there's a higher chance that you get an acceleration token onto the main scheme. And then as you add things onto the main or acceleration tokens on the main scheme, you have to take indirect damage, right? It's like kind of a whole system that works. And also some of his minions get stronger as well with the more sand counters out there. So you're kind of trying to balance sand counters. You're trying to defeat Sandman. I feel like it's the scenario that taught everyone how indirect damage actually works. So that's good, I guess. But I think he's a really good first scenario villain. Enjoy him. Same with Venom. Venom, I think, is a really fun scenario. Venom's really tough, really hard. Basically, every time you damage him, you deal yourself a face down encounter card that's going to be a boost card moving forward. So like if you do a lot of small little damages to Venom, it really hurts him. But you have to kind of exploit the bell tower, right? So if it's quiet, when any damage would be dealt to Venom by an attack, you can place it bell chime counters on instead. And then when you flip it, he takes one additional damage for each time you attack him, which is really kind of cool. But also on top of that, when he would damage you, you would just take chime counters off. And I feel like that helps balance it out a bit. So I really like Venom. Those two are really great. Mysterio was kind of this weird villain that I feel like a lot of people didn't like because they didn't like using the illusion cards. Basically, every single time an illusion card, after you resolve it as a boost card during Mysterio's activation, you place the card on the bottom of your deck, or you shuffle it in your deck, I think, or maybe on the top. I think it gets placed in different places, remember. But basically, if you draw that card, you get like an extra bad card, unfortunately. So people don't like that part of it, right? So when you would draw or discard an encounter card from your deck, deal to yourself as a face down card, and you get to draw a card. So it doesn't reduce the amount of cards you draw. It just gives you more encounter cards, and you can kind of tell when it's going to happen. So they're really limiting your card draw. I don't mind Mysterio. I know a lot of people hate Mysterio because it kind of messes up your deck. I don't mind it. I think it's pretty fun. Deja Vu, though, is a terrible card. I understand why people hate that. Sinister Six, love it. I think it's my favorite multi-villain scenario. I really, really enjoy Sinister Six. I want a lot of these villains to have their own scenarios, and I hope they will at some point. But Sinister Six, I think, is really good. Again, you're just trying to deal with all of them. And on top of that, you're trying to basically defeat the side scheme. You defeat the side scheme, you win the game. But you got to get through on true solo 20 threshold and then 15, but you could defeat villains to help speed that process up. So if you have someone like Hulk, he can still win the game even with no thwarting because he can knock out the villains so easily because they have low amounts of life that you can take all these counters off. So anyway, I really like that balance. I think it's well done. And then we have Venom Goblin. Now, what I will tell you with Venom Goblin is get rid of Goblin Gear, right? Don't put Goblin Gear in there at all. Goblin Gear is really, really, really tough to deal with. So for those that don't know, Goblin Gear is the one that comes with Advanced Glider, the bombs, remote navigation, right? All these different cards. So Advanced Glider is the one that after the attached villain activates against you, it activates against you again. To me, this is what makes Venom Goblin feel impossible. Now, he's still very hard because he has cards like We Are One, which is still a difficult card to deal with. But once you have enough threat to kind of control all the main schemes going on, all three of them, I think you'll be fine against Venom Goblin if you get rid of Goblin Gear. It's a much easier scenario if you get rid of it. You can add in like Hope if you want to. Hope Summers will help you. You can add in Magneto. Just getting that ally out there in the beginning can be very beneficial and very helpful. And again, I want to stress this. He's no cakewalk by any means. On expert, he's really, really hard. I just think Goblin Gear takes him to like this extreme level that if you can instead just put in a much easier modular set, it gives you a little bit more breathing room. Venom Goblin, again, I think he's the hardest villain in this game, but I still enjoy him. I still think he's mostly fair if you don't do Goblin Gear. I think Goblin Gear is just kind of broken. But anyway, that's my number one, Sinister Motives. So hopefully you've enjoyed this list. I'm sure there's people that right now are getting angry because they highly disagree with my list, and I totally get it. So do me a huge favor, write down in the comments what your list would be, what you agree with, disagree with, whatever it may be. Make sure to like button, subscribe, all that fun stuff. And if you want to support this channel, you can either go down to the join button and start supporting the channel for 99 cents here on YouTube, or go over to my Patreon on patreon.com/D20 woodworking. I assume that's it, but the link is down in the down in the description. Go check it out. If you want to support the channel, I greatly appreciate it, and I'll see you all next time.